بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار ثم أما بعد الحمد لله ما شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. We continue going over the tremendously beneficial book by the Fadilat al-Shaykh al-Allama Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. That book which is entitled Tanbihat على أحكام تختص بالمؤمنات. The book which is entitled Attention to some rules and regulations particular to the believing women. In the last class we began to go over those issues that are particular to the menses and those affairs that are connected to it. We pick up while mentioning the next point in which the Shaykh he mentions, because remember he's talking about those issues that are particular to the menses, those things that could and cannot be done while upon the menses. So the next, the Shaykh he mentions تترك الحائض الصوم والصلاة في مدة حيضها والتحريم عليها فعلهما, is that it is the woman who's on her menses, she is to leave off fasting and she is to leave off prayer, as-salah, في مدة حيضها, while she is on her menses. While she is on her menses, she is to leave off fasting and she is to leave off prayer. And it is haram, يحرم عليها فعلهما ولا يصحان منها, that it is not permissible for her to fast, nor is it permissible for her to pray while she is on her menses. It's not permissible for her to fast, nor is it permissible for her to pray while she is on her menses. And if she were to do so, then neither of them will be accepted, neither of them will be correct and acceptable. Now, they will not be correct, nor will they be acceptable. They will not be accepted. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and the proof and the evidence for this is the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, as it comes in that hadith that is متفق عليه, the hadith that is agreed upon by al-Bukhaari and by Muslim, agreed upon by both Imams. This hadith is متفق عليه, where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَلَيْسَ إِذَا حَاضَتْ الْمَرْأَةِ لَمْ تُصَلِّي وَلَمْ تَصُمْ, and is it not except that when the woman she is on her menses, then she is not to pray, nor is she to fast. She should not pray nor fast. نعم. فَإِذَا طَهَرَتْ الْحَائِض فَإِنَّهَا تَقْضِي الصَّوْمَ وَلَا تَقْضِي الصَّلَاةِ, and when the woman, when she has become pure from her menses, when her menses is over, and she has taken the ghusl, then at this point she is to make up those days of fasting in which she had missed. She is to make up those days in fasting in which she has missed, meaning that, for example, if she had gotten her menses in the month of Ramadan, then for those days in which she did not fast due to her having her menses in Ramadan, then she will make those days up later on in the year. She will make those days up later on in the year after Ramadan. She will make those days up. So she had menses for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 days, then she will make up the fast for those days, whatever their number may be. However, لا تقضي الصلاة, she does not make up the prayers that were missed while she was on her menses. So the prayers that are missed while upon the menses, then they are not made up. Now, only the fast is made up that is missed due to the menses. And this is according to the statement, لِقَوْلِ الْآعِشَةِ, according to the statement of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. This is according to the statement of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. And this hadith is a tremendous hadith, and this hadith also is muttafaqun alayh. This hadith is also agreed upon by al-Bukhari and by Muslim, by both Imam al-Bukhari and by Imam Muslim rahimahumullah ta'ala. And that is an Mu'adha radiyallahu anha, on the authority of Mu'adha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, qalat, she said, سألت عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها فقالت, she said, I asked Aisha رضي الله تعالى عنها, نعم, I asked Aisha رضي الله تعالى عنها, she said, ما بال الحائض تقضي الصوم ولا تقضي الصلاة. She said, so I said to Aisha, I said to Aisha, what is the affair of the woman who's upon her menses? Why is it that she makes up her fast but she does not make up her prayer? Now, why is it that she makes up her fast but she does not make up her prayer? فقالت رضي الله تعالى عنها, so our mother Aisha رضي الله تعالى عنها, she responded by asking her, أحرية أنت? She asked her, are you a Haruriya? And Haruriya, this is Kharija or Kharijiya. Now, Kharijiya, meaning she asked her, are you a woman from the Khawarij? Are you a woman from the Khawarij? Now, because Al-Haruriya or the Haruri, this was the name of the Khawarij in that time due to the place that they had taken up residence in. So they were referred to this laqab because of the place that they had taken up residence in. So the male Khariji, that he was what? Haruri. And the female Khariji, that she was Haruriya. Now, so when Mu'adha asked our mother Aisha this question, what is with the how come the woman, or what is with the woman who's on her menses, or why is it that she makes up her fast but she does not make up her prayer? Our mother Aisha, because she was very intelligent and her wisdom and her fiqh, her understanding was deep and profound, she asked her, Hahuriyatun anti, are you a woman from the Khawarij? Why did she ask that? Before we move on to the rest of the hadith, why did she ask that based upon this question? Because in this question, it carries the possibility of what? Of a person being extreme. Of a person being extreme. A person alluding or hinting to, we should also make up our prayer. We miss make up our fast, and then we make up our prayer too. A person being extreme, what? Beyond the bounds. And this is from the characteristics of the Khawarij. Now, as the ulama they explained, this was from the standpoint of why she asked this question, so as to make it clear that inside of this concept, then there's what? There's ghulu. there's extremism. Why? Because this is to do such, to make up the prayer, will be putting upon oneself that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not legislated upon them. To put upon themselves that which the Prophet ﷺ, he did not teach them that. Na'am. And this is what? This is extremism. That a person, he puts upon himself aspects of the religion that have not been placed upon him by Allah Azza wa Jal, nor by the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this would be extreme. Putting things upon a person's self that is not from the Sharia. This is bid'ah. This will be extreme. This will be ghulu in the deen. Na'am. So when this came across, she asked her, Ahariyatun anti? Are you a female khariji? Are you a khariji woman? That you're asking this question. So Mu'adha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she said, Qultu lastu biharuriyatin. She said, no, I'm not a woman khariji. She made that clear. She said, no. I'm not a woman kharijite. I'm not a female khawarij. I'm not from the khawarij. She said, وَلَكِنِّي أَسْأَلْ. She said, I'm just asking. She was curious. She wanted to know, the wisdom. The wisdom, or she wanted some more understanding on this particular issue. So listen, our mother Aisha, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, look at the wisdom. And look at the wisdom inside of her answer. Because Mu'adha made it clear, no, I'm not. This is not a challenging question. I'm not a female Kharijite. I'm not a female Khariji, right? I'm not from the Khawarij. I'm just asking a question. I just want to know. Just asking a question. So our mother Aisha, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she gave a beautiful answer. Listen what she said. She said, قالت, our mother Aisha, she said, kana yusibuna dhalika. She said that this used to happen to us. Meaning, we women used to get our menses. In the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the revelation was coming down, we women, we used to get our menses in that time. And in that, if you stop there and you contemplate, it sets down a tremendous principle. And that is that the deen, the religion of Al-Islam, is what was the religion of Al-Islam, where in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was upon, and that which what the Sahaba were upon, that was the religion. You understand? When the revelation was coming down, everything that needed to be explained was explained. Everything that needed to be taught was taught. Nothing was held back, nothing was hidden. Everything that needed to be explained was explained, and everything that needed to be taught was taught. Naam. And when the Prophet ﷺ, when he passed away, when he died, that was it. The revelation is stopped. So there's going to be nothing new or additional rules and regulations that's going to come after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. So whatever was the religion then that is what is the religion now. And whatever was not the religion then it is not the religion now. So our mother Aisha, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she alluded to this tremendous principle that whatever was the deen then it is the deen now, and whatever was not the deen then it is not the deen now, with her answer, with this beautiful answer. She said, Kunna yusibuna dhalik. This used to happen to us. We used to get our menses in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَنُؤْمَرُ بِقَضَاءِ الصَّوْمِ وَلَا نُؤْمَرُ بِقَضَاءِ الصَّلَاةِ. She said, and we were commanded, and this is also, subhanallah, a beautiful benefit that we take from this. She said, and we were commanded, right? Because the deen is by what? Is by the command. Naam, it's by the command. We know the actions that we are supposed to do because what? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do them. Because the Prophet ﷺ has commanded us to do them. So that's how we know those things that we have to do. Naam, because we find the dalil, we find the proof and the evidence from what? From the command of Allah and His Messenger. And this also shows us that the deen is by what? Is by the command of Allah Azza wa Jal. Meaning that the religion is not defined by us. It's not what we deem it to be. So we don't make up things and then that's Islam. No. But Islam is what Allah Ta'ala says it is, has taught us it is, has revealed to us what it is. Now, Islam is what the Prophet ﷺ, what was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, what he taught to mankind, what he commanded them with. So we know what is from the religion by what? By the command, and is not according to our desires, is not according to our whims, is not according to our intellectual pursuits and deductions. No, but the deen is according to what? By the command of Allah Azza wa Jal, the command of His Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That is the deen. You understand? So we know what to do because what? We were told what to do. And we know what not to do because what? We was told to stay away from it. So, beautiful benefit from this is that she said, نؤمر بقضاء الصوم ولا نؤمر بقضاء الصلاة. She said we were commanded to make up the fast, but we were not commanded to make up the prayer. Very simple answer, right? It's very simple. We were commanded to make up the fast. We were not commanded to make up the affair. So the answer to the question, how come this and how come that? Because what? Because this is what Allah has legislated. Because this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he has taught to us. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ has conveyed unto us. This is the way it is. This is what is legislated in the deen of Al-Islam. This is what is legislated in the deen of Al-Islam. That the woman who's on her menses, she makes up whatever fast that she has missed, but she does not make up the what? The prayers that were missed during the duration of her menses, right? And in this also is another indication, an illustration that highlights and shows the easiness of the deen of Al-Islam. Inna ad-din yusrun. Verily the religion is easy. The religion is easy, right? Al-Alama Al-Shaykh Fawzan Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he says, وَالْفَرْقُ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. He said, and the difference between what? The fasting and the prayer. He said, and Allah knows best. So as to show us some of the wisdom, right? Because see the answer, how come? Because that's what Allah has commanded. How come? Because that's what the Prophet ﷺ has commanded. That's the reason why. But now some wisdom, so that we can, better appreciate some wisdom as to why the Shaykh he mentions. أَنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَتَكَرَّرُ. He said because the prayers, there are many and they repeat. The prayers, there are many and they repeat, right? فَلَمْ يُوجَبُ قَضَاؤُهَا لِلْحَرَجِ وَمُشَقَّ فِي ذَلِكَ بِخِلَافِ الصَّوْمِ. He said that the prayer, it repeats and there are many, they're numerous. He says, so therefore, for this reason, there is not binding that they are made up. And this is due to difficulty, and this is due to that it will be hard. This is due because of difficulty, and it will be hard to make up the prayer as opposed to the fast. Now, when one reflects, a woman, if she was on her menses for 7 days or what have you, 5 times a day a prayer times 7, you understand, that's a lot of prayers to make up. That can become difficult, and this is in addition to she has to pray whatever prayers that are in on that particular day where she's making up the prayers, you understand. So that can be that's hard, as opposed to what? Just making up 7 days of fasting, right? And not the amount of salawat that may take place over the course of 7 or 8 or many days, however many days a woman may be on her menses. So when one looks at just the number of this and the number of that, they realize that the number of the days of fasting to be made up are way less than if you were to make up the prayers that were missed during the duration of those days. So that will be very difficult upon the woman to make up the prayers. Whereas to make up the days of fasting, that becomes very easy now, right? That's very easy. To make up just 7 days of fasting, just 5 days of fasting, that's very simple. That's very easy. Now, so this is another illustration to show us what the easiness of the deen of Al-Islam and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is extremely kind and gentle in the manner and way in which he interacts with in the manner in which he legislates the legislations upon the believing slaves. Allah Ta'ala, He wants for us ease. He does not want for us difficulty. So Allah Ta'ala, He has removed those things which are difficult, and He has not placed upon us a burden of which we are not able to bear. Walhamdulillah. And this shows the superiority of the deen of al-Islam. Allahu Akbar. The Shaykh, he moves on to the next issue, and this issue is a little detailed. We will not go over all of the detail of this issue, of course, due to the time, but we will go over some of the details of this issue. And this issue is important for us to know, so I ask everyone to try to follow along and to pay attention and to bear with me, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, as we will mention opinion by opinion, and then to the end. So wait to the end, inshallah ta'ala, then you'll be able to get the full scope. But if anyone cuts out or whatever before then you wouldn't get the full scope of what was intended and the like. So I ask that everyone listen to the full of what's going to be presented, and then you will have a better picture and you have more information so that you can make an informed decision. But yeah, based upon what? Based upon the proofs and the evidences. The Shaykh, he says يحرم على الحائض مس المصحف من غير الحائل لقوله تعالى لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. He says that it is not permissible for the woman who is upon her menses to touch the mushaf without there being a barrier, meaning between her and the mushaf, like she has on gloves or something like this. He said it's not permissible for the woman to touch the mushaf, to touch the Qur'an, when she's on her menses, except that she has to have something between her and between the actual mushaf. He said, and this is according to Allah's statement, what translated means, and none touch it except those who are purified. None touch it except those who are purified. وَلِمَا جَاءَ فِي الْكِتَابِ الَّذِي كَتَبَهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ لِعَمْرُ بن حزم لا يمس مصحف إلا طاهر, that none should touch the mushaf, and according to the letter, also to the letter in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam he wrote to Amr bin Hazm, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam therein it is said that he said that do not touch the mushaf except that you are in a state of purity. Do not touch the mushaf except that you are in a state of purity. Rawahu an-Nisa'i wa ghayrihi. It has been collected by an-Nisa'i and other than him. وهو يشبه المتواتر لالتقى الناس به بالقبول. لتلقي الناس به بالقبول. قبول, he says, and that it has almost reached the standard of being widespread and well known, a mutawatir, of which the people they have accepted. So you find most of the people, this is their understanding. فقال الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية رحمه الله تعالى مذهب الأئمة الأربع أنه لا يمس المصحف إلا طاهر. He says is that the Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he mentioned that the four imams you find in their madhahib the opinion that none should touch the mushaf except one who is in the state of wudu, except one who's in the state of purity, in the state of wudu. وَأَمَّا, so this is as relates to the touching, right, as presented up until this point. Right? You with me? So now comes the issue of reading the Qur'an. It says وَأَمَّا قِرَاءَة, to read or to recite, al-ha'id, that the woman who is upon her menses, that she reads or that she recites the Qur'an, القراءة الحائض للقرآن من غير مس المصحف فهي محل الخلاف بين أهل العلم. But as far as touching, or as far as reciting the Qur'an by the woman who's in a state of menses, by the woman who's on her period, without touching it, then this is an issue of differing amongst the people of knowledge. والأحوط أنها لا تقرأ القرآن إلا عند الضرورة كما إذا خشيت نسيانه والله أعلم. He says, but what is safer, and to be precautious, to better be safe than sorry, is better that she does not read the Qur'an except while she's on her menses, except due to a necessity. Like, for example, she is fearful that she may forget, then in that case, then she can do so. Now, he says, and Allah knows best. Now, this is what Al-Allama, Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzan, he presents as relates to this issue. And as far as reading it or reciting it, then the Shaykh, he mentions that his standpoint of where he's coming from is from the standpoint of just better be safe than sorry. Just better be safe than sorry. Okay? And I want you to understand that and have that in the back of your mind so that you can appreciate and understand better where the Shaykh is coming from. Even if due to proofs and evidences you don't agree with what the Shaykh he says, due to other proofs and evidences and so on and so forth, but at least you understand where the Shaykh he's coming from when he's saying what he's saying. Now, and presenting that which he has presented. Hafidhahullahu ta'ala. Tayyib? You with me? Now I want us to look at this issue a little more deeper, inshallah ta'ala, by looking at that which was presented, or that which the answer as it comes to a question that was directed to Imam bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam bin Baz rahmatullah alayhi, he said, he was asked by some female students of knowledge, where the questioner, she asks, إننا طالبات ندرس في مدرسة بنات. She said that we are female students. We study inside of the women's school. We study inside of the women academy. وفي حصة القرآن الكريم يأمرنا الأستاذ بقراءة القرآن ونكون في حالة العذر ونستحي أن نخبر الأستاذ فنقرأ مراعاة لذلك. She says that we are women inside of the woman academy, the female academy, and we have a session, we have a class for the Qur'an, for the noble Qur'an. And the professor, he tells us, or she instructs us to recite the Qur'an, but we are in a state of exception. We are in a state of excuse, meaning we have our period at this time. We are on our menses. She says, and we are shy to inform the teacher of that. So therefore we recite in compliance to the request. We recite in compliance to the request because we're too shy to say I'm on my menses. Right? She says, فَهَلْ يَجُوزْ هَذَا? Is this permissible? وَإِنْ كَانَ لَا يَجُوزْ, and if it is not permissible, فَكَيْفَ نَعْمَلْ أَيَّامَ الْإِمْتِحَانِ إِذَا صَدَفَتْنَا وَنَحْنُ فِي حَالِ الضَّرُورَةِ الشَّهْرِيَّةِ. She says, and if it is not permissible, then what are we to do during the exam periods, during the times and the days where the exams are going on, be they midterms or be they finals and so on and so forth? What are we to do during this time if unexpectedly it comes upon us our monthly occurrence? If unexpectedly it comes upon us our menses? What do we do then if we're not allowed to read from the Qur'an or touch it while we are in the state of menses? What do we do? So Imam bin Baz rahmatullah alayhi, and again, and I urge everyone, it's always important when you listen to these affairs of fiqh, when the ulama are explaining them, you can't cut out early. Like you can't hear half of it and then say, okay, I got it, I see what the Shaykh opinion is, and then that's it. No, you gotta listen to the whole thing. You gotta listen to the whole thing, because many of the mashayikh, they will bring various opinions. Now, and sometimes they will bring them as stated, without any comment. They'll bring them as stated, then they'll go on to the next opinion as stated, and then after they state everything that is said, then they'll go back and they'll make comments on those aforementioned opinions and statements, showing what is correct, what is incorrect, what is weak, what they deem as being more stronger, so on and so forth. So you really have to listen to the very end, into the end of the discussion, to get a full understanding of not just the issue, to get a full understanding of the issue, but also so that you walk away and you say, okay, and now I know what the sheikh's opinion is as relates to this particular affair, based upon this proof and that proof and this proof and that proof, and so on and so forth. But you have to wait to the end. If you cut out short, you're not really going to understand. So with that, Imam bin Baz rahmatullah alayhi, he says, اختلف العلماء رحمهم الله or rahmatullah alayhim. He says that the ulama, they differ. May Allah have mercy upon them. They differ. في قراءة الحائض والنفساء للقرآن الكريم, as relates to the recitation of the woman who's on her menses. Of the woman who's on her menses. And listen, and he adds to it. He just doesn't answer about the woman that's on her menses, but he also mentions what? وَالنُّفَسَاء, and also those women that are in postpartum bleeding. So he adds an addition. He just doesn't talk about, because see, the questioner, she only asks about those women who are upon their menses. Okay? She only asks about those women who are upon their menses. And it shows you the permissibility of what? Of bringing additional beneficial information that is related to the topic, although it wasn't asked about specifically. Na'am. And this was the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes he will ask a question about one thing and he will bring additional benefit of something that was related but not asked, but he will answer that too. So Imam bin Baz, following and imitating the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he added on to it that the ulama, they differ as relate, may Allah be pleased with them, as relates to the recitation of the woman who's on her menses and the woman who is in the state of postpartum bleeding. نعم لقراءة القرآن, whether or not they could recite the Qur'an. He said, فذهب جماعة من أهل العلم. He said, so a party of the people, a group of the people of knowledge, or some of the people of knowledge, نعم, they say, they have went with the opinion in a tahrim ذلك. They say they went with the opinion that it's not permissible for them to recite the Qur'an while they are upon their menses and while they are in postpartum bleeding. And it's important that we understand why and how they see it. You understand? It is very important that we begin to understand and seek to understand, even though we may not agree with the opinion, right? Even though we may not agree with the opinion of the outcome, is incumbent upon the student of knowledge. It's incumbent upon that you look into see what are the reasons, what are the causes by way in which the Shaykh is building his his conclusion on. Like, where did that conclusion come from? Based upon what principles, based upon what proofs and evidences did he reach his decision, did he reach his conclusion? And this is what allows us to be those people who are forbearing and tolerant when we see opinions in which we may not agree with, if we know, right? If we know that is based upon proofs and evidences, as that Shaykh saw them as being authentic, then we're able to be tolerant and forbearant with that opinion, even though we don't agree with it. And this is very important. Imam bin Muqbil al-Wadi'i, rahmatullah alayhi, this is a side point, he explained that we may not always agree, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we may not always agree when it comes to issues of fiqh. He said, Imam Muqbil, rahmatullah alayhi, he said, paraphrasing, that Allah has given all of us different degrees of understanding, different levels of intelligence, so on and so forth. He said, so it is possible that we may look at the proofs and the evidences and we may understand them the way that others from the Salaf have understood them. Now, we may understand them like others from the Salaf have understood them. Then there may be others who look at those same proofs and evidences, and they may understand them like others from the Salaf have understood them. Because a lot of the issues of ikhtilaf, when you look at them, you find that everyone is using the same proofs and evidences. It's just based upon how you understand those proofs and those evidences. Now, he says, and then you find, even though with the same proofs and evidences, they at the end, their conclusions are different, based upon what Allah has given them from intelligence, based upon what they may know from supporting proofs and evidence, and so on and so forth, based upon what they view as being sound or not being sound, and so on and so forth. They come to different conclusions. He said, but this is okay. And it does not go against our original agreement, because our original agreement is that we base everything on proofs and evidences. That's our original agreement. We base everything on Allah said, the Prophet ﷺ said, this was the way of the Sahaba. And if we do that, even though we may come to different conclusions, it's okay, because we still upon our agreement that everything is on the proofs and the evidences. And this allows people to what? To be forbearance and easygoing with their brothers and their sisters if they have a different fiqh opinion. But as long as they base it on proofs and evidences, as long as they base it on proofs and evidences from the Kitab and the Sunnah, as long as they based it on proofs and evidences as was understood by someone from the Salaf, right? And this is a very important point. It's a very important point. Is that a person can't bring a proof and an evidence and then he understands it in a way that nobody from the Salaf understood it. So in a particular issue, if the Salaf, if the Sahaba, if they were split amongst three opinions as relates to this issue amongst them, then we can't bring a fourth opinion. We can't bring a fourth opinion and say, oh, well, I see it like this. No. The Sahaba, they either saw it like this, like that, or like that. That's it. So the proper understanding is within that realm. There's no fourth or fifth opinion you can bring and say, oh no, because it's not like we're going to discover something that they didn't see. No, never. You understand? So it is incumbent that whatever opinion we go, we have what? We have someone from the Salaf, we have an imam from the Salaf who preceded us in understanding those proofs and those evidences based upon that way. And this will help us to, in a more detailed manner, understand the statement that we are upon the book and the Sunnah as understood by the Salaf of this Ummah, as understood by the Salaf of this Ummah. So if there comes an issue and you find that a person, he takes an opinion that was foreign to the Salaf, then we know he's upon dalala. He's upon misguidance. Why? Because the truth is in what? Is in the athar of the Salaf. The truth is in the narrations of the Salaf. You find the truth in what the Sahaba were upon. You can't come with a foreign opinion now and think that's going to be respected. No. But we're upon what? The book and the Sunnah as understood by the Sahaba, and then those who follow them in good. Now, is that understood? Well, inshallah ta'ala, I pray and I ask Allah ta'ala that this is understood to the people, and I apologize for any shortcoming in my articulation and the way in which I had presented that, or the words in which were used and selected. I apologize if there's any ambiguities or confusion that may contain therein, but inshallah ta'ala it's understood. But so getting back now, while we have to understand where this group of scholars are coming from when they say no, it's not permissible for the woman who is on her menses or who is in postpartum bleeding to read the Qur'an. It's not permissible for her. Why? Because al-haquhuma bil-junub, because they liken the woman upon her menses and the woman who's postpartum bleeding, they liken them to the one who's in a state of sexual impurity. They say that what? They're the same. They're similar. That the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, his situation is identical, or it is similar, let's say better, it is similar to the one who is on her menses or the one who is in a state of postpartum bleeding, or vice versa. The one who is in a state of menses or postpartum bleeding, they're similar to the one who is upon sexual impurity. وَقَالُوا, and they said, the scholars who went with this opinion, firstly they said they like the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, right? Also, they said, ثَبَتَ عَنِ النَّبِي, they said, and it's very important you understand this, they said, they see it as, that is confirmed on the Prophet ﷺ. They see it confirmed on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. نعم. أن الجنب لا يقرأ القرآن, that the one who's in a state of janaba, he does not read the Qur'an. The one who is in a state of janaba, he does not read the Qur'an. نعم. لأن الجنابة حدث أكبر. So they say, because the janaba is a state of major impurity. The janaba being in a state of sexual impurity, right? This is a state of major impurity. So they say, thus, al-hayd mithlu dhalik. So, menses is similar to that. That menses is a major impurity. وَالنُّفَسَاء مِثْلُ ذَلِكَ. And a woman in postpartum bleeding, she's in a state of major impurity. She's in a state of major impurity. So therefore, because this is major impurity, that is major impurity, so then it's like the junub who's in a state of major impurity. If the junub can't read the Qur'an, if the one who's in a state of major of sexual impurity, right, if he can't read the Qur'an or she can't read the Qur'an in that state, then those also who are in the major, which is major impurity, then those also who are in a state of major impurity, they can't read it either. Now, so again, if the one who is in a state of sexual impurity after having intercourse, right, with the spouse, then you have to take a ghusl. You have to take a ghusl. You with me? But before he takes that ghusl, or before she takes that ghusl, they're in a state of major impurity. So they say, since this is the case, and they can't read the Qur'an, so then anyone else who's in a state of major impurity also cannot read the Qur'an, which will include the woman who's on her menses and the woman who's bleeding from after having labor. ولا تقرأ الحائض ولا نفساء حتى تطهر. And the woman who is on her menses and who is on postpartum bleeding, they are not allowed to recite until they have become pure. Until have become pure. واحتجوا أيضا, and they also use as a proof and evidence بحديث رواه الترمذي عن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال, he said, لا تقرأ الحائض ولا جنب شيئا من القرآن. That it comes a hadith that has been collected in Tirmidhi on the authority of Abdullah ibn Umar, on the authority of Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, that says the woman who was on her menses and the one who is in the state of sexual impurity, then they are not to recite anything from the Qur'an. They are not to recite anything from the Qur'an. So based upon what was aforementioned, this is why they come with the opinion that it is not permissible for the woman who was on her menses to recite the Qur'an. Okay? Imam bin Baz goes on and he says, وَذَهَبَ الْآخَرُونَ, and others from the people of knowledge, min ahl al-ilm, they go with the opinion and they have seen إِلَّا أَنَّهُ يَجُوزُ لِلْحَائِضِ وَالنُّفَسَاءِ قِرَاءَةِ الْقُرْآنِ عَلَى ظَهْرِ الْقَلْبِ, that it is permissible for the woman who is on her menses and likewise the woman who is in postpartum bleeding to recite the Qur'an from what they have memorized, to recite the Qur'an by heart, what they have memorized. نعم. لأن مدتهما طويل أيام كثيرة، يعني طويل أياما كثيرة، فلا يصح قياسهما على جنوب. So I want you to understand where they're coming from. They say, no, listen. It's permissible for the woman who's postpartum bleeding and for the woman who's on her menses to recite the Qur'an. They said because the time period for which a woman is on her menses or she is bleeding postpartumly, then this time period is long. This is for many days. So with that being the case, it is not correct to liken them to a person who's in a state of janaba. They said it's not correct to liken them to a person who's in a state of sexual impurity. You see, so these scholars say no, they're not like the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, because their state lasts for days. Whereas the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, then what? He can take a ghusl, or she can take a ghusl at any time, and then it's over. So it can be for, some moments. It can be, you understand, that they're in a state of sexual impurity, and then they can take a ghusl and it's over. So the states are not the same, so they can't be likened to one another, and it's not correct to liken this to that. So they go with, and we understand the basis of what? Of why they say no, it is permissible. It's because what? She's not like the one who's junub. It's different. The one who's junub, the one who's in a state of janaba, he can get out of that state, or she can get out of that state at any time. And they have the choice to get out of it at any time. So they can always just take a ghusl and then read what they want to read from the Qur'an. Whereas the one who's on her menses, she doesn't have that option. The one who is postpartum bleeding, she doesn't have that option. So they're not the same. They're different. Okay? The Shaykh said, لأن المدته قصيرة. He said, لأن مدته قصيرة, because the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, his time frame is little. لأن في إمكانه إذا فرغ من حاجته يغتسل ويقرأ, because he has the option that when he's done from his need, then he could make a ghusl and he can recite. وأما حائض والنفساء فليس في إمكانها ذلك. But for the one who is on her menses and postpartum bleeding, she does not have that option. It's not possible for them just to make a ghusl and to recite anytime they want. وقالوا, and also these ulama who say it's permissible for her to recite the Qur'an, قالوا في الحديث السابق, they mention that the hadith السابق الذي احتج به المانعون, the hadith السابق, the aforementioned hadith, the hadith that is from the hadith that comes in the Tirmidhi, from the hadith of Ibn Umar. Remember the aforementioned hadith that the woman who's on her menses and the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, then they are not allowed to recite anything from the Qur'an. They mention that this particular hadith, أنه hadith ضعيف, that it is a hadith that is not authentic. This hadith is ضعيف. نعم, Imam bin Baz, he says ضعفه أهل العلم لكونه من رواية إسماعيل بن عياش عن الحجازيين وروايته عنهم ضعيفة. هذا وهذا القول هو الصواب. Sheikh bin Baz, he says this hadith is not authentic. The hadith that says that the woman on her menses and the one in a state of sexual impurity, they are not allowed to recite anything from the Qur'an. They are not to recite anything from the Qur'an. This hadith is not authentic, because inside of his chain you have Ismail bin Ayyash. And Ismail bin Ayyash, he is narrating on the people of the Hijaz. Naam. In his narrations, all of his narrations upon the people of Hijaz, the ulama of hadith, they say they are all da'ifa. They are all unauthentic. None of them are sound. None of the hadith that Ismail bin Ayyash narrates on the people of Hijaz, none of them are authentic. They are all unauthentic. Okay? And this hadith is from those hadith. Imam Mabazi says, and this statement is correct. He says, and this is the correct statement. Ahl al-ilm, the people of knowledge, wa Ahl al-hadith, the people of hadith, they say, هذا الحديث, this hadith was aforementioned to, from the hadith that's collected by Tirmidhi. The people of knowledge, the people of hadith, they say that this hadith is da'if min jami' turuqih. Is da'if, this hadith is unauthentic from all of its chains, all of its routes of transmission. They are all weak. They are all weak. Okay? And Imam bin Baz, he says, and this is what is correct. He says, so thus فيجوز للحائض والحائض والنفساء قراءة القرآن على ظهر القلب. He says, so therefore it's permissible for the woman who is on her menses and for the woman who is in a state of postpartum bleeding, it's permissible for them to recite the Qur'an from what they have memorized. It's permissible for them. It's permissible. He said, لِأَنَّ مُدَّتُهُمَا طَوِيلٌ. He said, because their time frame is long. فَقِيَاسَهُمَا عَلَى جُنُبْ غَيْرُ صَحِيحٍ. He said, so likening them to the one who's in a state of sexual impurity is not correct. He says, فَعَلَى هَذَا. So based upon this, building upon this, لا بأس أن تقرأ الطالبة القرآن. It is no problem for the female student to recite the Qur'an, meaning while she is on her menses or in a state of postpartum bleeding. وَهَكَذَا الْمُدَرِّسَةِ. And also for the woman who's teaching, also for the female instructor, فِي الْإِمْتِحَانِ, inside of the class or side of the testing time, also she can recite the Qur'an. وَغَيْرِ الْإِمْتِحَانِ. And also outside of testing time, she can recite the Qur'an عن ظاهر القلب, from her heart, لا من المصحف, not from the mushaf. He says, وَأَمَّا إِنْ احتاجت إحداهن إلى القراءة من المصحف فلا حرج عليها بالشرط أن يكون ذلك من وراء الحائل كالقفازين ونحوهما. He says, and if there is a need that is pressing and necessitates that one of them, meaning either the female student or the female teacher who's in a state of menses or they are postpartum bleeding, if they have to read from the mushaf itself, then there's no problem for them to read from the mushaf itself and to touch the mushaf, with the condition that they touch the mushaf from behind a barrier, like two gloves and that which is similar to it, like gloves and that which is similar to it. So we see more better now the issue of can she recite the Qur'an. We see that now, right? And what the ulama they say about this issue. And now we see the issue of touching the Qur'an, of touching it. Okay? So, we start to see what is mentioned about touching the Qur'an while in a state of menses or while postpartum bleeding. Imam al-Albani, he mentions the other opinion, because I mentioned to you one opinion about touching it. Is that what? You touch it from behind a barrier. You touch it from behind a barrier. Okay? You touch it from behind a barrier. Imam al-Albani, rahmatullah alayhi, he mentions that touching it from behind a barrier, then this is okay, right? This is okay. However, he deals with the issue of, but does she have to touch it from behind a barrier? It's okay to use gloves, right? Or that which is similar to it when upon the menses or postpartum bleeding to turn the pages of the Qur'an. It's okay. But does she have to do it? And let's look at the proofs and the evidences that are presented that says she does, and some that say she doesn't. Or better, let's look at some of the proofs that say she does and some of the proofs that say she doesn't, and or that are used to say this and used to say that. Imam al-Albani rahmatullah alayhi, he says, يجوز للحائض مس المصحف بدون الحائل. He says it's permissible for the woman who's on her menses to touch the mushaf without a barrier. She can touch it with her bare hand. He says ولا يوجد دليل صحيح في منع الحائض من قراءة القرآن. He said, and there is no proof that's authentic that prevents the woman who's on her menses from reciting the Qur'an. There's no proof that's authentic that prohibits the woman on her menses or postpartum bleeding from reciting the Qur'an. And also what? And also from touching it. There is nothing that proves that it's haram to touch it. Now remember, we're talking about whether it's permissible or impermissible. We're not talking about whether it's better or not. The issue of being better is another issue. The issue of being better, that's a separate issue. Now we're dealing with, is it permissible for the person not in a state of wudu to touch the Qur'an? right? And also we can attend to a person who's not in a state of wudu. Is it permissible for them to touch the Qur'an or not? That's what we're talking about. The issue of it being better, that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. Now, and for lack of time, let's deal with that issue. That's easy. Is it better to touch the Qur'an while you have wudu? Yes. Is it better to read the Qur'an while you're in a state of wudu? Yes, that's better. The ulama, they mention that. That's better. But let's deal with, is it permissible to touch the Qur'an or to recite the Qur'an while not being in a state of wudu? The Shaykh, he says, وَأَمَّا قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى, because what is used as a proof and evidence to say that it is not permissible to touch the Qur'an except that you have to have wudu and be in a state of wudu, they use as a proof Allah's statement, لَا يَمَسُّهُ إِلَّا الْمُطَهَّرُونَ, that none touch it except those who are purified, as it comes in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, in Surah Al-Waqi'ah. The Shaykh, he says, وَالْمَقْصُودُ مِنْ هَذِهِ الْآيَةِ, he said that which is intended by this verse, الْكِتَابِ الْمَكْنُونَ, what is intended by this verse is the book that is guarded. What's intended by this verse is the book that is guarded, meaning al-lawh al-mahfuz. That's what is intended, not the Qur'an. He said, وَلَيْسَ الْقُرْآنِ, and not the Qur'an. وَالْمُطَهَّرُونَ, and what is intended by those who are mutahharun is who? Humul malaika, they are the angels. Al-mutahharun, they are the angels. So that was it said, لَا يَمَسُّهُ, it is not touched, meaning lawh al-mahfuz. إِلَّا الْمُطَهَّرُونَ, is not touched except by those who are mutahharun. And the mutahharun are the angels, not the person in a state of wudu, but they are the angels. This is what Imam Al-Albani is mentioning. And then so we understand better, Imam Al-Albani, he brings what? He brings the ayat, he brings the verses that are around this ayat so that we can better understand the full context of what is being spoken about. And Allah Ta'ala, he says, and this is in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, verse 77, Allah Ta'ala, he says, إِنَّهُ لَقُرْآنٌ كَرِيمٌ, that verily it is the noble Qur'an. It is the noble Qur'an. Fi kitabin maknoon, it is in the preserved book. Right? It is in the preserved book. And then Allah Ta'ala says, La yamassuhu, and none touch it. So where does that it return back to? Does that it return back to the Qur'an al-Kareem, or does that it return back to the kitab that's maknoon? That's yani the book that is well guarded. Which does that it refer back to? That it, Imam Al-Bani says, refers back to what? The last thing that was mentioned, and that was the kitab that's maknoon, the book that's well guarded, and lawh al-mahfuz. So none touch it, meaning the book that is guarded, the book that is well guarded, and lawh al-mahfuz. Illa al-mutahharun, except for those who are in a state, or except for those who are purified. Except for those who are purified. وَهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. And then Allah Ta'ala, he finishes off this topic here by saying, تَنْزِيلٌ مِنْ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, that which has been sent down from the Lord of all that exists. Imam Al-Bani brings another point so as to further show us and illustrate how this ayah, it can't be talking about those who are in a state of wudu, but it has to only be talking about the angels. Imam Abdis says, فَنَحْنُ لَوْ تَطَهَرْنَا, he says, us, if we were to clean ourselves, meaning if we were to go into a state of wudu, what would you call us? What would we be referred to? He says, نَصْبَحُ مُتَطَهَّرُونَ, أو نَصْبَحُ مُتَطَهَّرِينَ. He says, if we were to make wudu, purify ourselves, or make a ghusl if we had major impurity and so on and so forth, we will be called mutatahharin or mutatahharun, because of the grammatical construction of where it's here. Nasbahu mutatahharin, we will be mutatahharin. Mutatahharin means in a state of purity. But is that what Allah Ta'ala said in the Qur'an? Did He say mutatahharun? No, Allah Ta'ala said mutahharun. He didn't say mutatahharun. He said mutahharun. There's a difference. Two different words, two different meanings. Mutatahhar, this is the one who's in a state of purity, the one who's in a state of wudu. This is mutatahhar. But the one who was mutahhar, he is the one who was purified. Okay? So if we were to make wudu, then we would be in a state of purity, not purified. You wouldn't say about us that we are purified. No, we are in a state of purity. We are in a state of purity. Okay? So this is another, it shows us again also that if we make wudu, you don't say about us mutahharun. No, we will be mutatahharun. Mutatah, not mutatahharun, if we in wudu. But those who are purified, they are mutahharun, the angels, the malaika, they are purified. Whereas us, we are mutatahharun. We go into a state of purity. That makes sense? But the Shaykh, he says, al-mutatahharun hum al-malaika. Those who are purified, they are the angels. Well, and also, what points us to this understanding that it's not speaking about the issue of can you touch the Qur'an in or out of wudu or not. It's not speaking, it's not a dalil for that issue. Is that وأن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها حينما حجت مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, is that Aisha, our mother Aisha, when she made Hajj with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, فجاءها الحيض, she got her menses. She got her menses. وهي نازلة في مكان قريب من مكة اسمه صرف. She got her menses when they had stopped at a place that was close to Mecca, and the name of it was Sirf. The name of the place was Sirf. And she got her menses. She saw her menses had started. This is what before they started the Hajj. She got her menses. فدخل عليها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فوجدها تبكي. So the Prophet ﷺ, he entered upon her and he saw she was crying. She was crying. She was upset. She got her menses now. She came, to make Hajj and with the Prophet ﷺ, and now she got her menses. So she was very upset. She was crying. فقال لها صلى الله عليه وسلم. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said to her, Malik, what's the matter? What's the matter with you? He said, Anafisti? He said, did you get your menses? Did you get your period? Because he saw her crying in his state. Right? And ordinarily, this is a state of great joy. We about to make Hajj, a state of great joy. But he saw she was crying. He said, what's the matter? Did you get your menses? Did you get your menses? قالت نعم. Our mother Aisha, she said, yes. نعم ya Rasulullah. Yes, O Messenger of Allah. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Now remember, when a woman gets her menses, what? She's not in a state of wudu. She's not in a state of wudu. We understand that, right? That's clear? When a woman has her menses, she is not in a state of wudu. She doesn't have wudu. What did the Prophet ﷺ say to her? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, هذا أمر كتبه الله عز وجل على بنات آدم. He said, this is a affair that Allah has written, that Allah Azza wa Jal has written on the daughters of Adam, ala banati Adam, on the daughters of Adam. He says, فَاصْنَعِي مَا يَصْنَعُ الْحَاجِ غَيْرُ أَنْ لَا تَطُوفِ وَلَا تُصَلِّي. The Prophet ﷺ told her, while she's in a state of menses, do everything that the person making Hajj does, except do not make tawaf and do not pray. So he told her, do everything that the person making Hajj does, the person who's making Hajj, everything that he does, do it. Or everything that she does, do it. Except what? Except making tawaf and except praying. Except tawaf and except praying. Imam Al-Albani, he uses this and he says, فَالشَّاهِدْ هُنَا أَنَّهُ قَالْ فَاصْنَعِي مَا يَصْنَعْ الْحَاجِ غَيْرُ أَنْ لَا تَطُوفِ وَلَا تُصَلِّي. Do everything that the one making Hajj does, except do not make tawaf and do not pray. And of course, the one who makes Hajj, does he read the Qur'an? Yes. Does he touch it? Yes. Right? And so on and so forth. So in this, it shows us that these other things that are well known that the person making Hajj does, then the woman on a state of mention is allowed to do it. Because if she wasn't allowed to do it, then the Prophet ﷺ, he would have listed it when he mentioned the exceptions of what she can do. He said everything except for, do everything they do except for, don't make tawaf and don't pray. Why? Because you're on your menses. That makes sense? So you see where the Shaykh is coming from as using this proof. So he says that which is mentioned that says she can't touch it is not applicable to her situation, because it's not talking about her, it's not talking about the issue, but it's referring to a Lawh al-Mahfuz and the Malaika. So this can't be used in this issue because it's not talking about this issue. And that those things that do talk about this issue don't prevent her from touching the Qur'an, nor does it prevent her from reading the Qur'an, because these things were not mentioned. But exceptions were mentioned, but these things were not mentioned. So therefore what she can do, these things. وفي رواية, and he brings another hadith. وفي رواية للمسلم عن حميد الطويل عن أبي رافع عن أبي هريرة أنه لقيه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في الطريق من طرق المدينة وهو جنب, is that it comes in the hadith that's collected by Muslim from the hadith of Humayd al-Tawil on the authority of Abi Rafi', on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that he said that I met up with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in one of the streets from the streets of Medina. I bumped into him in one of the streets of Medina on the road. He said, but I was in a state of sexual impurity. I was in a state of janaba. He was junub. Na'am. So when this happened, Abu Hurairah, he narrates, he says, فَانْسَلَّ فَذَهَبَ فَاغْتَسَلَ. He said, so when that happens, I ran into the Prophet ﷺ. I was in a state of sexual impurity. He said, I discreetly slipped away. I discreetly slipped away. And then I went and I made a ghusl. I discreetly slipped away, left, and then I went and made a ghusl. Na'am. فَتَفَقَّدَهُ النَّبِي صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. He said, and then when this had happened, the Prophet ﷺ, when he realized that Abu Hurairah wasn't there, right, he looked for him, he looked around for him. And this was the way of the Prophet ﷺ, is that those who were constantly around and so on and so forth, the Prophet ﷺ, he would take notice to their absence, and then he would ask about them. Why is so-and-so not around? Why is so-and-so not here? Right? This was the concern the Prophet ﷺ he had. So if it was something that he was sick, or the person was in need of something, and so on and so forth, then what? Then the Muslims can mobilize to go and help that person, to go visit them, so on and so forth. So when he saw people who were usually around, when he saw that they weren't there, he would ask about them. This was the concern the Prophet ﷺ he had for the Muslims. And this is something that we need to imitate ourselves, that when we don't see our brothers and we don't see our sisters for a time period, we should call them and check on them. If we should go to the house and check and see if they're okay, see if they need something, and so on and so forth. This is how we should be. This is the kind of love we should have for each other, right? But anyway, when he looked around and didn't see him, he asked about him. What happened? Where is he? He looked for him. فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُ قَالَ. And then when Abu Hurairah came, he came back, right? After he made the ghusl, he came back. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَيْنَ كُنْتَ يَا أَبَا هُرَيْرَةَ أَيْنَ كُنْتَ يَا أَبَا هُرَيْرَةَ. He said, where was you at, Abu Hurairah? Oh, Abu Hurairah, where was you at? You see the love and the easiness and the beautiful manner how the Prophet ﷺ used to interact with the Sahaba. He said, oh, Abu Hurairah, where'd you go? Where was you at? قال Abu Hurairah, he said, Ya Rasulullah, لقيتني وأنا جنب فكرهت أن أجالسك حتى أغتسل. He said, O Messenger of Allah, when I met up with you, I was in a state of sexual impurity, and I didn't like to sit with you until I made a ghusl first. I had to take a shower first, right? The minute you didn't take a shower, meaning a ghusl. I had to make a ghusl first. I had to wash up first, right? فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said to him, Subhanallah, innal mu'min la yanjus. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, Subhanallah, the believer is not impure. That meaning that no matter what state the believer is in, he is not, or she is not impure. She is not najis. He is not najis. Right? Imam al-Mani, he says, وَالشَّاهِدْ هُنَا. So the point of reference here and the point of evidence here is the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنِ لَا يَنْجُسْ, that verily the believer is never impure, is never defiled. So no matter what state they may happen to temporarily be in, overall the believer is what? Is pure. Is pure. Not najis. Why? Because who's najis? Who's najis? Allahu Ta'ala. He tells us in Surah At-Tawbah, in verse 28, Allah Ta'ala, He says, إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ نَجَسٌ. Allah Ta'ala, He says, verily, the polytheists, the kuffar, they are najis. They are najis. Naam, they are najis physically, and they are najis in an abstract manner as well, or in meaning. Meaning what? Physically, they're najis. Right? They don't make istinja or istijmar, right? Properly. They don't clean themselves properly after using the bathroom. We know this. So these kuffar, they literally have najasa upon their body physically. Okay? These kuffar, they literally, and we're talking about the majority of them, have najasa upon their person physically. They wipe themselves with their right hands, right? Many of them don't even wash their hands after they use the bathroom, and they eat with the same hand they wipe themselves with, right? Or they may wipe themselves with the left hand and they eat with the left hand too. This is the kuffar. You see, so they najis, their physical person is najis. But and they also najis, and from another standpoint, and that is their beliefs are najis, because it's based upon shirk. It's based upon polytheism, which is najis. They are upon kufr. They are upon disbelief, which is najis, which is dirty and is filthy. Their lifestyle is a lifestyle of kufr, a lifestyle of shirk, a lifestyle of sin and transgression. So their lifestyle is najis. So when you look at the kafir, he's najis from every which way, shape and form. And even if they escape being najis or having najasa upon their body, even if they escape having najasa upon their body physically, their lifestyle is najis. Their lifestyle is najis, so they can't escape this description. The kuffar, they are najis. You understand? That makes sense? The kuffar, they are najis. But the believer is not like the kafir. So the kafir, he is najis. So therefore what? The believer ain't najis. The believer is not najis. So thus the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Subhanallah, innal mu'mina la yunjas, or la yanjus. He said, Subhanallah, really the believer, he's not najis. He does not become najis. He does not become in a state of najasa, or he does not become in a state of impurity and defilements. No, that's not the believer. Meaning what? Showing him that even if you were in this state of sexual purity, don't feel that you couldn't come around. You can still come around and sit around, because the believer is never najis. The believer is never najis. So it's okay. It's okay. And in that, again, we see what? The beauty and how the Prophet ﷺ used to interact with the Sahaba, and how he used to make them feel comfortable and make them feel good and happy and bring joy to them. Allahu Akbar. Believers, all Muslims, it is incumbent that we adopt some of this character, and we start to interact with our brothers and our sisters like this. That we make them feel welcome, we make them feel inviting, and we make them happy. We make them feel comfortable. This is incumbent, it's incumbent upon us to be easy and gentle and nice and to our brothers and to our sisters, to be nice and easy and gentle to the believers, and to make them feel welcome, and never make them feel like like they'll be shunned or anything like this. This is incumbent. And of course, we mean upon those who upon that which is correct. And of course there comes times where we boycott people, yes. There comes time where we turn away from people, yes. But that's for a reason. That's because they have done that which necessitates that. So those people upon innovation, those people upon bid'ah, and they call to it, and they are advocates of it, and so on and so forth, then yes, then they're not welcome, and then we're not going to be around them, and then we don't want to sit with them, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, because of what they are calling to is despicable, and it necessitates that we stay away from it. Now, so I don't want to confuse that with this. Two different issues. But we're speaking about that there is nothing that necessitates treating someone in such a manner, religiously, not saying you mad at him, you thought he looked at you strange or whatever. No. But from the deen, I know personal stuff. From the personal stuff, you got 3 days. Personal stuff, you got 3 days. That's it. You got 3 days to be mad, get over it. Give salam, it's done. But that stuff that is from the deen, like bid'ah, gross sins and this like that, then that's different. Then we stay away from a person because we don't want what they have been afflicted with to afflict us or to afflict others, nor do we want to be a distraction or a fitna for others by them thinking that we are accepting people who are upon this nasty bid'ah or upon this nasty sin and transgression, the open sinner, and then thus think that it's okay to be like that, and then they become lackadaisical as relates to these matters. So from all standpoints, we avoid those people who need to be avoided. But outside of that, we have to learn to be more welcoming. We have to learn to be more gentle and more easy. We have to strive to make the believers happy and to bring joy into them, because we are rewarded by Allah Ta'ala from bringing joy to the believers. To bring joy to the believers, smiling at them, makes a person's heart feel good, and then usually they reciprocate, they smile back. You understand? These little things are important, and I want to just stress, please focus in and stress and look at these things and strive to implement these things when interacting with the brothers and the sisters. And here in particular we stressing with the Salafy wa Ahlul Sunnah, when you interact with those upon the Sunnah, be nice and gentle with them. Why you all mean and all nasty and so you have like a despicable disposition with them? For what? They Ahlul Sunnah. What's wrong with you? Why are you treating a Sunni like he's bid'i? Why are you treating a Sunni like he's bid'i? What's wrong with you? This has to stop. This stuff is sick. It's from shaitan. The people upon the Sunnah, they have to be good to those upon the Sunnah. Those who have issues, those who have mistakes, we correct their mistakes with wisdom. We correct their mistakes. We don't be quiet about them. We correct them. We correct them. If we have to be a little tough with them, we be a little tough with them. You understand? But we have to remember what that the nobility of the Sunni, the nobility of the Sunni Salafi is maintained, even when we correct his error. Whereas the bid'i, when we correct them, la kiram alahu, then there's no there's no nobility for him, and not for the person upon bid'ah, then there's nothing for him. He gets it. But for the one who's upon sunnah, even we correct them, we maintain their honor. So this is just a reminder based upon this to be good to the people upon the sunnah and act with them in a good manner, in a good way, and to be welcoming and not to be of those who are repulsive and push people away. And then the Shaykh, he mentions the issue of making the tawaf. That's also the woman upon her mitzvahs. It is not for her to make the tawaf. And he brings as a proof and evidence the hadith that was aforementioned, that do everything from my mother Aisha, that when upon Hajj and the mitzvahs it comes, maybe her mitzvahs it came when she was upon Hajj, as the Prophet ﷺ told her, do everything the one who was on Hajj does, except for make tawaf and except for praying. So we understand from that too that a woman who's on her menses, she is not allowed to make tawaf. And then the Shaykh goes into an issue that comes after that, but it is an issue that requires a lot of discussion. So we will stop here and leave that to the next time. And I apologize for the length of the class, as today's class is a lot more longer than as usual. But the issue was very important, and I wanted to finish it in one sitting so that we are not left hanging in the middle of the issue, and which may lead to misunderstandings and the like. But what was presented from these two Imams and from the Allama, inshallah ta'ala, to be sufficient, so a person can be somewhat grounded and somewhat rounded in their understanding of this particular issue, and thus they can make a decision based on the proofs and the evidence as they understand them. They can make this informed decision بإذن الله تعالى. بهذا نكتفي بهذا القدر، وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، وجزاكم الله خيرا.